Horses built this country.
If you look at the history, horses started here. They belong here. They fit well here.
A wild horse represents freedom.
A wild horse is everything we wish we could be. They're beautiful, they're strong, wild, and free.
There's nothing like watching them sail across the landscape. The spirit that exudes out of their whole persona, the family units, the landscape they live in.
The United States as a nation and the citizens owe it to these horses to provide them with adequate care on and off the range.
There are more than 30,000 untamed horses.
And their numbers are increasing.
Thankfully, there are people doing everything in their power to keep the Wild West alive.
The Bureau of Land Management is now offering to pay you $1,000 to adopt a wild horse.
Wild horse advocates are calling for a formal investigation.
What horses? What shooting?
A lot of money is being spent, yet there are no solutions to this very real problem in the West.
Because, as often happens on Western lands, they're caught up in the crossfire.
There's just so many stories, so many different agendas. Who do we believe? Who are we supposed to believe? My name is Jamie Baldanza, and I'm a wild horse photographer and advocate, and I'm just a Jersey girl who fell in love with the Wild West.
My name is Dani Carson, and I'm actually from Minnesota, but my passion is wild horse photography.
We're here as two wild horse enthusiasts to show you another side of the story. Which side? All sides. Through beauty and conversation, we believe we can help promote awareness and provoke a much-needed change in the wild horse world. Even though our biggest priority is keeping wild horses wild, we understand there is a much-needed balance between all stakeholders. So come with Dani Carson and I, two wild horse photographers looking to make a difference, as we take you through the Wild West and show you the world of our beautiful American icon, the wild horse.
Long before your highways, your planes, trains, and cars, I carried you for miles, and I gave you my all, and together we created an empire to share. So now I need you to remember I was there. Just watch me fly underneath the western sky.
Everyone told us not to do Twin Peaks. And the reason why, they said, you're not gonna find horses, the weather is always bad, and driving through could be really difficult. At home, I drive a 350 dually pickup, so this is a cakewalk. But Deb and I was just like, screw it, we're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna do Twin Peaks, and we'll either fail miserably, or we'll get some really beautiful stuff on a herd that doesn't really have any documenting.
We knew that it wasn't a very well-followed HMA, and it would be a challenge, and we really were up to that challenge. We really wanted to experience an area that we hadn't been in, didn't know anything about, and see what we could find. And the HMA has very limited access, so you can't just drive wherever you want to go.
The terrain is really tough, it's really big, and to go in there blind is really humbling, because Deb and I are used to herds on much smaller acreage and habituated to humans. So when we went to Twin Peaks, the horses would bolt the second they'd see us.
We had no idea if we were going to find horses. It's like hunting for gold in this unmined landscape, and there they are.
So the topography here in Twin Peaks is so diverse, from the south side to the north. But as you go south, from the south you have this kind of wide landscape of sagebrush. And as you move toward the north, you're gonna find where you start to see a few junipers start to develop. You're gonna start to see like more mountainous areas, more peaks. And then as you get all the way north, you end up in like almost solid juniper areas. And so the elevation as it changes through Twin Peaks.
This HMA is a really, really unique area. It's at the southern end of the Modoc Plateau. It is the western end of the Great Basin. We have both the Sierras and then the southern end of the Cascade Mountains that all kind of converge here and create a very unique climate and a very unique landscape.
Actually, this whole part of the edge of the Great Basin, which was created by volcanoes, leaves behind these flipping rocks. And it's covered with sagebrush and flowers and filled with lizards, and it's just really a cool place. We really fell in love with it.
Twin Peaks is located in Northern California and shares a boundary with Nevada. Twin Peaks is the largest herd management area in California and consists of 758,128 acres that are shared among livestock, wild horses, burros, pronghorn, coyotes, mule deer, sage grouse, and tons more. However, there could be anywhere from 1,500 to 3,500 wild horses and burros in this HMA, depending on who you ask. The predominant land uses within the HMA are livestock grazing, wilderness recreation, and general recreation, including hunting. Twin Peaks is different from other HMAs in the western United States in that it's been divided into 5 large areas they call home ranges. Observation North Home Range, Twin Peaks North Home Range, Skedaddle Home Range, Dry Valley Rim Home Range, and Observation South Home Range. In addition, Twin Peaks has 9 different areas for livestock usage. As you can see, they overlap with the home ranges. The HMA isn't all public land though. Approximately 133,000 acres inside this HMA are private.
Well, historically, the horses on the Twin Peaks HMA trace their roots to ranching families in this area. An important part of their history is the fact that local ranchers were raising horses on the range for remounts for the cavalry.
The horses in Twin Peaks were absolutely stunning. I'd never actually really seen horses like them. They were hardy, they were colorful. Some of them had this beautiful metallic sheen on them, and they were just so curious. So the fact that they would run away from us when they saw us actually made me happy. It made my film crew very upset, but it made me happy because it meant they're still pretty wild.
I felt that they were distinctly different on the southern tier versus the northern part. There are 5 home ranges in the peaks, which I believe truly has created some genetic traits that are specific to certain areas. I can't say that with scientific certainty, but definitely we saw some different types of horses from north to south.
Since Twin Peaks is an HMA that Deb and I have never been to, we decided to actually fly over and really learn the land.
We did it so that we would understand the HMA better from the topography above, because we'd spent an entire week getting to know the Twin Peaks from the ground. We also went up with Jessica to find out where the horses were, so it would make it easier for us to get the crew into the horses. And then the other reason we went up was to learn how herd counts are done and to experience that.
So I've done 7 aerial counts out here in a high-wing plane since 2010 to track the population growth. So the method that I use is called a transect strip method. And the purpose that I use that one for is because I can randomly select the transect lines, and then when we fly those lines, we use those as a density observation. And so what we do is we survey both sides.
We use the scientifically proven double observer method. We have 4 independent observers in our aircraft, and each one has an independent probability of detecting the group. We also use transect spacing based on the topography out there. It's also based on what type of vegetation is out there. So it's a grid that's flown across the landscape, and it's not necessarily a north, south, east, west grid. It might be based upon more on our topography out there. Most of the lines that we fly, these transect lines that we fly out here in Twin Peaks, are about a mile apart. We look for horses and burros on both sides of the aircraft. It usually takes 8 hours of flying, 5 days a week.
So the BLM and Jessica have very different counting methods. But after going up there and seeing it, it was really hard because Jessica doesn't exactly take the whole route, but she does it over 1 day. And then the BLM does it over several days, so it could be double counting.
And how can you actually do a herd count when you're going 120 miles an hour at 500 feet above the ground, and you're looking at little specks like this, and you have to discern whether it's a burro, a horse, or a cow, or a sheep, or a pronghorn, or anything that might live on 4 legs out there.
So you have one study saying there's 1,500 horses and burros, and the other saying there's 3,500. I mean, who are you to believe? Who is right? We need a more efficient way to determine this number. Anyone? Ideas? Suggestions? So Deb and I really liked Skedaddle area. It's the south side of Twin Peaks. We've seen horses there before, so when the crew arrived, we really wanted to take them there to get some really beautiful footage. We saw horses on the south side of the road. So we decided to take lunch and just kind of hang out with them. And as we're staring at them, Deb points me on the back and is like, look behind you. And we look behind us, and there must have been 50 horses, just kind of all up on this giant mountain, just absolutely stunning. So then the challenge was not scaring them. We did end up scaring them. So we weren't successful at that moment, but
we hiked in and found a bachelor band that took off. But we followed them for a little ways, and we're photographing them, even though they kind of kept moving away, but they were putting on a show for us.
We saw some of the most beautiful bands, and we saw, a stallion protecting his family from another stallion. As the beautiful buckskin stallion stood watching us, another stallion was watching him. Watch how in the back left-hand corner, you see another band stallion leave his family and run out of frame. The buckskin takes notice and turns his attention to him. We are now the lesser threat to his family. The bay stallion quickly trots back into frame to challenge the buckskin stallion. The buckskin meets him out halfway. They both sniff, posture, and spar to size each other up. Then the buckskin fiercely starts to protect his family the only way he knows how, by fighting. After a short moment, the buckskin then moves his band to try and get them away from the bay stallion. But that doesn't stop him from following close behind. The bay stallion is still too close for the buckskin's liking, so he gives him one last warning with a final fight of rearing and biting. And then they all run off.
When they were done, I had to walk away from Jamie because I didn't want to have her see me crying, because it's just so profound when you get to witness that. So I was glassing below, and we saw this beautiful Cremello band, which we nicknamed the Blondie Band, kind of hanging around a dry area. So we were downwind, so we had a better opportunity of approaching them. So we cut across the valley, got ourselves in a position where the horses couldn't smell us, but they could see us, and then that's when that kind of he was a gray stallion, just put on this really cool show, brought his band up to us.
and the stallion kept snorting at us because he couldn't tell what we were because we were downwind. So he would circle us and then come back and circle again, and his band would follow him, and it was just really beautiful to watch. What was really cool about this band is that even though it was a large band, you could really see the family structure. You see, free-roaming horses in America are a part of the equid species that are harem-forming and exhibit long-term stability of social groups. The main social unit, referred to as a band or harem, consists of one or more adult males, one or more adult females, young animals of both sexes not yet having left the band, and the foals of that foaling year. The primary social roles of a band stallion are the following: reproducing offspring, tending to his harem, which includes defending them from potential predators and invading stallions, recruiting more harem members, and herding, or snaking, his harem when approached by intruders or other bands. The primary social roles of a dominant mare are the following: herding and defending the harem in the absence of the band stallion, and taking over the group activity, such as relocating for forage or water. Finding wild horses can be a total crapshoot. Just because a horse was in one area the day before doesn't mean it's going to be there the day after. You can go in there with a plan, but you're going to just have to throw it out because you're at the mercy of wildlife, landscape, and weather. We're getting hailed on. So you just have to go in there with an open mind and get what you get. So we went back to Skedaddle, and instead of making everyone go up the hill, I volunteered to climb the really tough, high hill. But I went up there, I walked out about a quarter of a mile with binoculars, and I didn't see anything. And so, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I came back down, and we just decided to call it. So once again, we went back to Skedaddle. We went up blind, and it was taking a chance, and it paid off because we did see them. But it was really, really difficult to get to them because typically when Deb and I like to go photograph wild horses, we like them to know that we are there. We like them to smell us and be comfortable with us before we start filming them. But with these horses, we had to take a totally different approach where we had to stalk them like prey. We had to find cover. We had to be downwind if we wanted to get anywhere close to them. So we found a watering hole, and we just sat there. And the horses started to come. One by one, a band came to the watering hole, and we had smiles ear to ear because it was just so cool to see. We saw 3 foals playing. We saw our Blondie band again. We saw 2 mules. And everyone was just having fun at the water hole. And I think Deb started crying. It was just really emotional because you don't typically get to see that, especially at Twin Peaks.
Burros are typically more solitary than horses. They're pretty independent. They're also quite a bit more curious and unafraid, it seems, of humans.
Oh my God, Deb really wanted to see a burro. And we finally got to see one, and it was a little Jack, just kind of by himself, but his ears were like broken. And we had no idea why, but he was the cutest little thing. And it was so perfect because the sun was coming down, he was in amongst the yellow wildflowers, and he was just peacefully just munching away, and he was really cute. Bonus, we also saw tons of baby burros. You haven't lived until you've seen a baby burro. You just want to squeeze them and love them until their little head pops off. But then you kind of remember they're in the wild and you can't go anywhere near them. Also, every once in a while, you'll see a burro with a band of horses, which will then result in a mule.
Going up to Dry Lake was a bit of a challenge. We tried to drive up, and we got 25 yards off the road, and we got a little muddy, and that's when I realized this isn't going to happen, even for lull, so we backed out of the area and hiked up a different way, trying to make it easier, and I'm not sure that we did, but We got to the top, weren't seeing any horses when Jamie's like, hey, are those ears behind those rocks over there? And I'm like, where? And you look and here comes this horse running at us. I'm like, yeah, those are ears. And then pretty soon out of the trees, all these horses start pouring out. And that's what they do in the northern part of the HMA. They hide under the trees in the heat of the day. And then we followed them a little bit further, and there I find Jamie with this audience of pronghorn staring at her. So it was really cool, because we got to see pronghorn interacting with horses, completely showing that, yes, all species can cohabitate in all kinds of environments.
There was like 16 little females and one male, a buck, I guess, and they were just totally into us, and we got some great footage of them. So Deb and I really like Dry Lake. We found ourselves going back there a lot, and we finally were able to drive up and not hike up. And when we went up there, we saw this lone bachelor stallion, and he was beautiful. Deb called him Clint Black, and you could tell she had a connection with him. And we just kept watching him, and he kept sticking around and letting us film him. And we were so into filming him that all of a sudden our camera guy, Bobby, goes, hey, guys, look that way. And we all turn, and there's these two bachelors, and they're like, ah! And we're like, ah! And we all scared each other, and we all ran away. I hear Deb going, because everyone ran away, and we lost our lone bachelor, we lost these other two bachelors, and once again we felt defeated. But they came back, and they gave us quite a show, and
they just kept running back and forth and challenging each other, and then they would run right by us, and then they'd run away and run by, run away and run by.
The sun was going down, and these bachelors were, you know, they were puffing their chest, and they were prancing, and it was just such a beautiful moment.
I bet it was like 5 minutes. It seemed like forever.
And Deb cried again. We went north to Dodge Reservoir, and right away we saw two bands, and they were absolutely stunning.
And it was a joy, because these horses were obviously more habituated. And instead of walking 100 yards or 5 miles, we only had to walk like 25 yards, because basically they're right there on the road.
And we spent some time with them, but it wasn't until later, when Deb was looking at her pictures, we realized one of the stallions had these piercing blue eyes. And so we kind of became obsessed with finding this band again. At the same time, we were going to do some drone shots of the HMA, but it wasn't working. So as we were on the side of the road trying to figure out the drone, one of our camera ops had to go tinkle. And I hear her run up behind me. She's like, I was peeing, and this bay horse was staring at me. And we're like, oh my God, is this the horse with the blue eyes? So we all went back, and we thought it was one horse, and then we saw another one pop out, and then another one, and then another one. And we saw this beautiful band kind of emerge from the trees. And what I really liked about this band is that the lead mare did not take her eye off us for a second. And the stallion was just super chill.
So, like 2 hours later, we get this amazing footage of the blue-eyed stallion and his harem, and Jamie goes away to eat lunch, and that's when I like, come on, we're gonna stay with these guys, because this stallion's gonna take this stallion on, and they did, and Jamie missed all that because she was eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
How's my hair look? So when we first started this project, it was also more of an expose on all the different things that the BLM is doing badly or could improve upon.
This baby was probably born today, and we don't know if it's going to make it.
This project is taking a different approach, because we have to work together and lay aside our differences to really accomplish what needs to be accomplished for our wild lands and our wild horses.
We want to talk to the stakeholders involved, the ranchers, the BLM, the advocates, the scientists, whoever has an opinion on wild horses, we want to talk to. We spend so much time trying to figure out what someone else has done wrong instead of figuring out what someone is doing to make it right.
And with our social media outlets today, it's really easy to sit in a chair behind your computer and judge what's going on versus stepping out into the landscape yourself and experiencing it.
So we would constantly ask questions like, what is the AML? How many wild horses are actually out there? Are they native? Are they non-native? And literally, we would get different answers to every single question. And I'm just like,
I'm tired of not knowing where to find the correct answer. Let's put it like that. Because everyone I talk to, I get a different response from. Government will tell me one thing, advocates will tell me another, and then there are all the people in between. So yeah, seeking truth and finding what truth is the hardest part about this whole project.
My name is Jessica Johnston. I work in the state of California as an environmental scientist and planner. There's a lot of evidence that maybe horses didn't leave North America. There's a lot of fossil evidence. There's still evidence, like science is continually growing. A lot of that is not taken into consideration. So I see the wild horses as a native species, and if you spend time out here, you see how they really fit into the ecosystem. They really play a strong role here. And so when you're looking at that designation, it's really important because then they could be potentially protected by Endangered Species Act. There's a lot of different reasons why they wouldn't want that designation.
I'm Laura Snell. I'm the Modoc County Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor working for the University of California. So I conduct research on Forest Service lands as well as BLM and private lands and help them with their wild horse program. There was a species of equine that was in North America, but if you look at the pictures and the bones that they've recovered, this is a completely different species of animal than what currently exists. A much smaller, three-toed species that was more, like an anteater than like our traditional horse we have today. The horses that are now here were brought by the Spanish and then later, used for farming, agriculture, cavalry, but horses were not native to North America.
So I have one scientist telling us wild horses are native and another telling me that they're not. Who should we believe? What do you believe?
My name is Amanda Gearhart. I'm a wild horse and burro specialist for the Bureau of Land Management. I am responsible for 14 HMAs in the Northern California district, which is approximately 1.5 million acres.
My name is Jeff Fontana. I'm a public affairs officer for the Bureau of Land Management in Northern California. Our district covers the northern third of California. We manage about 1.5 million acres in far northwest Nevada, the Great Basin, extending all the way over to the Pacific Ocean, the redwoods on the coast. On the north, our district it starts at the Oregon border and continues down into the northern San Francisco Bay Area. So a big, diverse territory.
Different people have different needs from this land. This is public land. I completely understand that charge. I understand that and appreciate it in more than one way. I think that we need to balance that out. It seems to be tilted and driven mainly by the livestock industry, especially in this area and into Nevada. So, part of the recommendation I would have just to start out with is how do we balance that? Let's take a step back. Let's look at our resource management plans. What is the science telling us about the land that we are managing? I always want to tell everybody, we can do better than this.
This is what I just found.
We reach out to a variety of groups whenever we're making land management decisions. Oftentimes, some of our best ideas come from the public. This particular field office is often thought of as fairly progressive. And right now we're in the process of developing water out here, working with some of our nonprofit partners and our private landowners to develop water out here for everybody, wildlife, livestock, and wild horses and burros.
Collaboration is absolutely needed. It's needed with the scientists that are willing to step up, and there's a handful of us, not just scientists, but the public. There's so many people that have knowledge that could really contribute to that effort, but you have to feel like you're being heard.
What Deb and I really wanted to do was find someone who was unbiased, who could really talk about how the land can thrive. And basically the conclusion was, The land can sustain all animals or wild animals, cows, horses, sheep, as long as it's managed properly. And that's the key. It doesn't have to be a range war on the cattle and the horses. They can both live there and the land prosper and they can prosper. It's just what we do and how we control the land. You know, it's never been the fault of the cow or the horse. It's always been human error. So we need to start getting on board and learning techniques so everyone can thrive.
My name's Spencer Smith. I'm a rancher in northeastern California, and then we also operate the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management, assisting other farmers and ranchers develop management plans that yield regenerative outcomes.
I believe managed grazing can be situated to both horses as it is to cattle. Management is the big thing. You know, it's the amount of animals, it's the timing of those animals that are used on the landscape, because animals have a really important role to play in nutrient management and in reducing fine fuels.
Maybe a better question, and a question that isn't ever asked, is what do we want these landscapes to be like? We can't manage for health and prosperity if we don't define what health and prosperity is. Once we identify what our ecosystem goals are, then we can start to manage for ecosystem function in a way that will respect the needs of everybody and all parties that are engaged with it. We can destroy a landscape if we keep the animals completely off of it. We can equally destroy a landscape with, everything from rabbits and chickens to sheep and goats to horses to, wildebeest. It doesn't matter. What matters is that since we have taken that role of predator and we are now the ones that are keeping those animals bunched, we need to be more deliberate with our moving so that we create those dynamic results on the soil surface that will allow the water to infiltrate. Well-managed horses can, without a doubt, be a part of a healthy rangeland and in the management of a healthy rangeland. There's no reason, so long as they're a well-managed population, that they can't be a part of a healthy biome.
What I took away was that horses can coexist on a thriving landscape if it's managed properly.
Our last wild horse and burro gather in the Twin Peaks HMA was in 2010. We gathered and removed about 1,600 wild horses from the herd management area. That got us down to about just slightly over the high end of the appropriate management level. So now the BLM is considering the need to control populations again.
The Bureau of Land Management, Eagle Lake Field Office, is proposing to gather and remove excess wild horses and burros from within and outside the Twin Peaks herd management area in order to achieve the established appropriate management level over the next 10 years.
My name is Bill Phillip, and I started working with the BLM up in Prineville, Oregon in 1958. Went from there to Burns, Oregon, and worked for 20 years. And I came down here and retired in 1995. Running horses with a helicopter can be the best thing in the world or the worst thing. This depends on the pilot. You can totally abuse a set of horses with the helicopter by pushing them too far, too fast.
I understand why the BLM would use helicopters to round up horses, especially in Twin Peaks, but personally, I could never get behind it.
The trap is the most dangerous place in my mind. I mean, if you get 2 or 3 stud horses in the trap at the same time, they immediately go to fighting, and they booger each other up. And if there's little colts in there, they might get kind of trampled on.
So the last gather that they did in 2010, they did actually do fertility control. Any mares or jennies that are released to the landscape typically have had fertility control applied. This particular herd is a really large herd compared to some of the other herd management areas. I think that any sort of fertility control program has to be multifaceted and multi-pronged and have partners that help you out in that as well. The most successful PZP stories come from herd management areas that typically have smaller numbers of animals that are more uniquely identifiable and that they're sort of geographically isolated.
My name is Doug Satika, Litchfield Facility Manager. pretty much manage all day-to-day corral operations, anywhere from animal care to shipping to incoming new animals. We're a, quote, temporary facility. We ship horses all over the United States. So they come here, we prep them, adopt out of our facility, and then some of those horses probably go East Coast, wherever, for adoptions.
When they come to adopt, if they say, I like horse number 8004, then that's how we ID them without having to shave their freeze mark and figure out what number they are.
So we want to show you firsthand what it's like for a wild horse to go down the chute to get prepped. Come on, let's go.
Holding pens are scary, but what I liked about Litchfield is that it was big, and the horses did have room, and they did a good job of trying to make it a natural landscape for them. We got to see a couple Twin Peak burros that were up for adoption, and they are so cute up close.
We have probably approximately 130 Twin Peaks burros, and then there's more every day because they're falling, so you guys will see, but there's probably another 10 babies after we brought them in.
We need to get the 45,000 wild horses that are currently in the corrals adopted to loving homes.
It's gonna be really hard not to bring one home with me.
I think we can do it eventually. Hopefully, over time, we can do it, but we're not gonna do it without everyone working together.
I think adoption is one of the least used tool in the toolbox that the BLM has. It needs to have the most money at this point in time dedicated to making sure all these horses get into homes that are forever homes. And I believe that adoption is the key to managing our wild horses to a point where my goal is to have 0 horses in pens and a long waiting list if you want an American wild horse.
TIP program is funded through BLM, but it's ran through Mustang Heritage Foundation, and they have qualified trainers to come, take an animal from our facility, take it home, and they have 60, 90 days to work with it and find that horse a home, and then they receive $1,000 if they find it a good home.
My name is Abigail Curtis, and I'm currently from Standish in California, which is near Susanville. I became a tip trainer for the Mustang Heritage Foundation in the year 2015, and I've adopted 40 animals. One person can make a big difference.
My name is Ed Fitzhenry. My experience with wild horses and burros is as basically an assistant to Abigail. So I do the trailering, I assist with training for their new home so that when they get out, they're amenable to being handled.
So Finn is a Twin Peaks Mustang, and he was adopted, and then before the year was up, they returned him. So I went to the Litchfield Corrals and I saw this big horse standing there, and he seemed to be quite down. I know that's a human emotion, but he did seem to be quite lethargic and quite down. So I asked about him, and they said that he'd been returned. So I said, well, we'd like to pursue adoption of him.
Finn's attitude is basic laziness. When you're out on the trail, there's no sign of his being lazy. He just wants to go. But when you're working him in the arena or around the house here, he kind of gets a little bit.
Finn was really cheeky and playful. He's very caring. Yesterday, he had 2 little girls ride him, and so he just walked very, very carefully.
We also got to meet Cleo, who is a Twin Peaks burro, and she just loved to be loved on. She would give you kisses.
Oh! She just is adorable. Cleo's just wonderful for me. So an adopter wanted to adopt her, and they did. Didn't work out, so the person took her back to the corrals, and when I went there, I just heard this yell. She was way back in this corral, and there was just this braying. I was like, Cleo, I was braying. I was like, oh my God, and it was Cleo, ah! And I just said, oh no, oh no. Then I yelled again, Cleo, blah, blah, blah. Oh. Can you hear it? Yeah, Cleo, well, yeah. Yes, so that was it. They're burrows. They're going to bray. It's a fact of life. You don't get a dog and think it's not going to bark. So that was it. It was kind of, that was it. She's going to come home and that's going to be my life. So she's going to be here. Accept it. Some things you can't change.
Adoption stories are always my favorite because you think of a horse getting rounded up in the wild, you think their life is over, and it really does something to your heart. But when you get to see that second chance, and when people take the time to really give them that second chance, it's amazing. Dani California. There's just something about Dani that tugs at your heartstrings. She wasn't flashy. She didn't have lots of color. She was just beautiful chestnut mare with a story to tell. And we wanted to tell it. Skydog saved her.
Skydog Sanctuary is based at 4 ranches, 3 in California, 1 in Oregon, but this being our main one, we have 9,000 acres here that we use predominantly for the wilder horses to basically give them their freedom back. And so they live pretty wild and free. We basically rescue mustangs from at-risk situations across America. So that could be neglect, abuse, starvation, Mexican rodeos as tripping horses. We take special needs horses from the BLM. We've tried very much to take mustangs from all kinds of situations to educate and raise awareness for different situations that they can end up in.
Skydog is magical. You step onto this land and you're totally transformed. You're amongst all these wild horses. You know, they might be a little bit gentled, but they still have their wild spirit.
I get sent nowadays, we get sent, 20 emails a week or messages on Facebook or whatever, which is really difficult because most of them end with, and if you can't take them, they're going to be euthanized or sent to slaughter or stay in a really bad situation. And it gets really hard, but there are certain horses that just get me in the heart, and it doesn't matter what I do. If I close my eyes at night, I can still see that horse, or there's something that I just feel they need to come here. Like, this horse needs us. And I think it's always been that, and I have a very, very strong sense that every horse here came here for a reason, and that it was right for them and right for us. Dani California is, she is such a special horse. And it's really funny because I can't think of another horse that I had such a visceral reaction to. And I remember I was in my office down in Malibu, and I had my computer open, and there was a kind of, they do a sort of a live feed. There was a rescue at an auction, and they showed a little bit of video footage, and someone kind of stuck their phone inside a trailer, and all I could see was actually a trembling, dreadlocked mane. And for some reason, I turned to the person that was in the office with me and I said, "That's a Mustang, and she's coming to Skydog." She actually had turned her body horizontally in the trailer, and there's 3 horses behind her. All of them were drenched with sweat, and she was trying to protect them. And the guy that brought them to the auction dragged her out by her tail, and she was standing there shaking, and I heard the girl that was there say, "This is a branded Mustang." And I literally just messaged the rescue and said, "We'll take her." And we went and picked her up that day, and she came back to the ranch in Malibu, and I could tell now that she was blind in one eye, so she was incredibly nervous and jumpy and reactive. And I just stood in her stall and unmatted her mane for like 5 hours that night. And I just talked to her and tried to soothe her, and she kind of stopped weaving and eventually just like took a giant deep breath and just kind of released a lot of stress and anxiety. And I just started to cry because I don't know, there was just something about like she suddenly believed she was safe, and she had stopped shaking, and it still to this day emotionally affects me to remember that and think of the connection that I made, I guess, that night with her. And I don't know why I'm crying, but she is just a really special horse to me. And she kind of represented everything that, we do in trying to bring a horse that has been in such a bad situation and has lost hope and, just really has gotten used to abuse and kind of thinking that people are bad and they, equal pain. And And I just kind of wanted to tell her that, you know, a hand is never gonna hurt her again. Dani California got her name. It was kind of really, really cool, actually. It's one of the coolest stories that I have about the naming of a horse, because we put up on our website, you know, like a lot of people had donated for her to come to us, and we said, you know, let's get some suggestions of names, and we'll use one of the names that you suggest. So people were sort of suggesting this and suggesting that. And I had actually settled on one. I think we'd called her Cheyenne, and I was like, that's a perfect name. And then someone said her name is Dani California, but not like her name should be or that's a good name. It was just her name is Dani California. And I read it and I didn't understand the reference to begin with, but literally 10 minutes after I read that, the BLM lady emailed me and said that she was from Twin Peaks, California, and she was our first California Mustang. And I thought, isn't that funny that her name is Dani California and she's from California? And so I don't know what. I was like, yeah, okay, her name is Dani California. If you're that sure, we'll go with it. And someone said, I love that song. And it was a Red Hot Chili Pepper song. And I listened to the song and it was like, she's a runner, she's a stunner. And there were words in there that kind of really fitted her. So I was like, oh, that's amazing. You know, it sounds like they're talking about her. Sanctuary life for Dani now is really good. I mean, we used to have her in Malibu, and she wasn't an ideal horse to have there because of her kind of reactive tendencies, and it was slightly nervous having people around her. But here, I think she really has found her place, and we actually tried her in a couple of different places, and she is very, you know, I feel like horses are always talking if you're listening, you know, and you notice their small cues and their subtleties, and she's one that really can make her opinion heard, and she'll tell you if she doesn't like the group of horses she's with, or I think she has led us to where she is now, you know, in a smaller herd where she's incredibly loved and sort of doted on by the boys she's with, and she likes that dynamic, but she also has a girlfriend that she's kind of best friends with. So I think she ended up in an ideal place, in a good amount of space for her, given her disability, and the other mare's blind. So she sort of ended up in a perfect spot where, you know, there aren't really any things that she can, you know, hurt herself on. There's a big amount of space. There's hills she can run on. There are woods she can stand in for shade and shelter. And I think she's back to kind of the life that she was born to, really, out on the range.
Neither Deb or I want to be a part of the drama. We want to be a part of the solution. We are encouraging discussion, seeking all stories, first-hand facts and knowledge, because if we all can't come to an understanding about our wild horses, who loses? You? Me? Nope, the wild horse. It doesn't just take saving wild horses to actually save wild horses. It takes conserving the land, the water. It takes having a conversation with all sides. It takes working together to find solutions that maybe no one has even thought of before.
Seeking truth and finding what truth is the hardest part about this whole project. I don't know that we will ever find out what the truth is, unfortunately, but I believe that we can make a difference by at least putting it out there for other people to decide.
I want to do what feels right, and I want to stick to my gut. And my gut says, let's do this in a positive light, make America fall in love, and give the horses a fighting chance by showing stories, their story.
I think the horses have always needed a voice. I try to be the voice of science on their side, and I think their stories definitely need to reach the public. I think people need to understand what the challenges are out here. And you know, it's not always just about the pretty horses, but how do we conserve this ecosystem?
We need to bring awareness to America, so in 50 years, our grandkids can experience what it's like out in the Wild West and revel in that moment when a wild horse runs by, taking your breath away, mesmerized by the sheer power and beauty. Because if they're not here anymore, we lost a direct link to our heritage, our history, and everything else that comes with it. We are their voice. We are also their solution. Deb and I invite you to stay strong for our wild horses, to sing their praises, tell their story, remind each other how much they did for this country, how they carried our ancestors from New Jersey to California. They fought our wars. They plowed our fields, carried our mail. And now, we must return the favor, so our wild horses and burros will be here for the next generation.